All right, guys, welcome back to the second video of the Unit 4 Outcome 1 series. That's Key Knowledge 3, but remember in the first video we covered the first two Key Knowledge dot points, which is why this is Key Knowledge 3 instead of 2. This one is all about analysing performance using KPIs. So here is our study design. That's the bit we're looking at. Now, you can see there's quite a bit in there. Look, this is going to be a bit of a long video. Remember, there's only 4 videos produced covering this entire outcome. So a few of them are a little bit longer than the average video. So look, grab a drink, grab some snacks, take a break while you're doing it. But yeah, there is a fair bit to cover in this one. And mainly because it gives us a script. It identifies 10 KPIs that we need to know about. Okay, so bit of a long one, but stick with it. Now, breakdown of this video, this is what we're going to be looking at. What do we mean by the term key performance indicators? Now, I've actually already used the word KPIs a couple of times. You might already be familiar with that term KPIs. From now on, I'm not going to say key performance indicators. I'm going to say KPIs. But remember, in an answer, the first time you use a term, write it in full and put KPI in brackets, and then you can use KPIs after that. Why are KPIs important in a business? Some attributes of KPIs, relevant, reliable, measurable, we'll look at in a minute. The comparative nature of KPIs. Then really the big focus of this video is the actual 10 KPIs that you need to know about. Definitions of all of them, really, really important, and historically done very, very poorly. So make sure you can absolutely nail a definition of every single one of these KPIs. And bit of information about what information these KPIs can give you about the performance of the business, so we understand what that KPI is all about. Linking aspects of performance to KPIs, and then I'm going to look at some exam questions, because in this, or covering this key knowledge dot point, we see a different type of exam question than we've ever seen before. Okay, we see some basically analysing some numbers, some graphs, some charts, some tables. Never seen that before. So look, you don't need to be a maths genius to do this, but it's the first time we've ever seen questions involving actual numbers, and we need to work out what those numbers are telling us. So I'll give you a couple of examples of that at the end. Okay, so like I said, from this point, I'm only going to say KPI. I'm not going to say key performance indicators, but I think you probably are already aware of what we mean by the term KPI. Now, in terms of defining KPI itself, key performance indicator itself, look, there's 4 different ones, okay? Again, don't put them all down. Have a look at each. Which one kind of resonates with you? Which one do you reckon you'll be able to remember? But it's important that you can just define the term, not only define the individual KPIs we're going to look at, but define what KPI in and of itself is. So choose one of those which seems to make the most sense to you, which you think you could then replicate later, okay? Now, coming back to our study design, I guess, look, this is earlier study design. So this is Unit 3 Outcome 1, right at the beginning of the year, okay? Possibly even when we did orientation. We looked at business objectives, okay? Remember this: to make a profit, to increase market share, to improve efficiency, so on and so forth. So the study design basically gave us the objectives that businesses are going to be trying to achieve over a period of time, okay? So the whole point of this is, if we've got objectives, how do we know if we actually achieve them, okay? So it's all very well saying we want to make a profit, we want to increase our market share, but obviously we need to know down the track if we actually manage to do that. And how we know if we achieve them, how we know if we met those objectives or exceeded them or didn't meet them or whatever the case might be, it's through the use of KPIs. So that's why that we do this. And there's a link back to objectives. So again, we kind of see now a lot of what we do in Unit 4, you're going to see there's links back to stuff that we've seen already in earlier parts of the course. And here's an example of one of those links. So why they're important? Look, KPIs basically inform managers about various aspects of the business or the business as a whole, okay? In terms of effectiveness and efficiency, it allows them to make decisions about changes that they might need to make based on the information that these KPIs kind of throw up. So they provide information to managers about how the part of the business that is their responsibility is going, and then it allows them to make some informed decisions about how they manage that business or that part of the business in the future. Now, KPIs can tell you about the performance of the business as a whole, individual teams or divisions within the business, right down to individual employees. Okay, it depends on what exactly we're measuring and how we're applying the KPI. So very, very broad range. So individuals right through to the entire business as a whole. So for example, we need to know how X is performing. We need to know if X is hitting their targets. We need to give ourselves the chance to take corrective action before it's too late, and celebrating small successes along the way. That X could be, you could implant there the business. It could be a team within a business or an individual. Okay, applies the same way. Now it's through measuring KPIs that we're able to do those things. Okay. Now, attributes that KPIs must have. Okay, so there are three qualities, and there's been questions. I've seen questions on this before. There are three qualities or three attributes that a KPI should have if it is going to be considered to be an effective analytical tool. In other words, if it's going to be useful. Okay, first off, they must be relevant, so they must provide data and information required by the business to analyze its performance. I mean, kind of a no-brainer. It must be reliable. Okay, so the data and the information must come from trustworthy sources, and it must be collected in an appropriate way. It shouldn't be based just on like anecdotal comments by employees or customers or whatever. It needs to be reliable. Okay, and I guess as we go through these KPIs, these will become more apparent and more obvious. It must be measurable. Okay, we're talking about measuring things. Okay, so we must be able to measure the data either quantitatively or qualitatively. So quantitatively using numbers, qualitatively through other means. Okay, so our KPIs must meet those three criteria. And if they don't, it's not a good KPI. Like the information it provides is not necessarily going to be useful. And bearing in mind, we're making decisions about our business based on what these KPIs are telling us. If they're not useful, if they're not, if not relevant, not reliable, not measurable, not going to be useful, it can lead to us making the wrong decisions. Now, the next thing I said on the original intro was KPIs must be comparative. This is a really, really important point, and this will bear out certainly by the end of the video as well a little bit more. So if I told you that my mate's business made a profit of $10 million last year, okay, would you say that's a good result or a bad result? Okay, $10 million, a lot of money, yeah? So presumably go, yeah, that's awesome, great result. But what if I then told you that the year before it had made $30 million, the year before that 25, and the year before that 20? Suddenly, this year's result of $10 million does not sound so good, okay? That's because KPIs are comparative. So you've got to compare over a period of time. Now, these comparisons can be made in a couple of ways, okay? You can compare the same business results over a period of time. So in other words, looking for increases or decreases in the same KPI in your business. That then tells you if you're moving in the right direction. That's what we were just doing with that example I just gave you. It went from 20, 25, 30, and then the next year it dropped to 10. Okay, that's comparing the same business results. And that's where very clearly you can see that suddenly that $10 million is not a great result. We had 3 years of nicely increasing results, and then it kind of fell off a cliff. So while $10 million is still a lot of money, that would not be deemed to be a good result. The second way in which you can compare, or KPIs can be comparative, is benchmarking against other similar businesses. Okay, what is normal for my type of business? In fact, if I go back there again. So, for example, if you're running a fast food business, a lot of your KPIs are going to be very different to, say, a law firm. I think we've got an example of that a bit later. So you would compare to similar types of businesses, okay? So in my industry, staff turnover tends to be 10%. Our staff turnover is 30%, then probably you've got an issue, Okay, so you have to benchmark against similar businesses. So I'll throw an example of that a bit later to kind of nut that one down a bit further. Now, what are the key performance indicators? So that study design was a fair chunky bit because there's 10 of them, okay? Now, there are literally hundreds of different KPIs that any given business might use to measure different aspects of their own performance. And big businesses, like big international businesses, there would be hundreds, if not thousands. But for the purpose of this course, there are only 10 that you definitely need to know, okay? Now, you can refer to other KPIs in answers if you like. Like if you're aware of other KPIs and they seem to apply in this scenario, in this case you're given, it's a dangerous way to play it. I'd avoid that if possible. You really want to stick to these 10, okay? These are the 10 that the study design can specifically ask you about. And these 10, or from these 10, it would be possible to answer any question that they throw at you. So really, I would stick to the 10, okay? Now we're going to get into those 10, okay? So by the end of this, you want to have a really good understanding. First off, like I said before, nail the definition. You have to be able to define each of these accurately. And that is something which often in exams is really, really not done well at all. So for each one, I'm going to give you a definition and then talk a little bit more about it. So there's a definition for market share. And yeah, you would never actually have to calculate it. But just to kind of add to your understanding of what it means, taking a company's dollar value in sales over a period, usually a year, and divide it by the total value of sales made by that industry over the same period. So, for example, like this is completely made up numbers, obviously, but if there was $1 billion worth of mobile phones sold in Australia in 2022, and $500 million worth of those were by Apple, then Apple would have 50% of the mobile phone market in Australia. Okay, it's as simple as that. Okay, and actually, as I say this, again, most of these KPIs we've come up against before. Okay, in fact, increasing market share was one of the key objectives. So I think nearly all of these KPIs, bar maybe one or two, we've kind of seen before in earlier parts of the course. Again, another example of the links between different outcomes, which can obviously exist in an end of year exam because by then you've covered every outcome. So questions do kind of bring different key knowledge dot points and different outcomes even together. So not a new concept, but just reiterating it here. Just some demonstrations. I'm going to throw in some media reports that I've just recently pulled off the internet just to kind of demonstrate these KPIs in use. So here's one that I got off. This is from a couple of months ago. So I'm recording this mid-June 2023. If you're watching this in future years, Amazon and Aldi tips as rising threats to Australian retailers as experts predict both brands are poised to grow market share this year against a backdrop of savvy consumers. Basically, what this story is all about, how the cost of living at this point in time has now been increasing pretty dramatically over the last 6-12 months. Interest rates are increasing, inflation is increasing, everything is becoming crazy expensive. And what this article is basically saying is businesses that are focusing on budget people, so Aldi, instead of going to Coles and Woolies because Aldi's a bit cheaper, these type of businesses under these conditions can actually do well, okay? It can benefit them because people then switch to lower cost options. So that's really what's surrounding this. But yeah, poised to grow market share, okay? So just showing you in use in media. There we go. Aldi says it's 17% cheaper. Shoppers think it's worth the trip, okay? So this is, again, the idea that, as things become more expensive in life, people might then start to shop at Aldi instead of if they usually went to Coles and Woolies because it's cheaper. Okay, and again, they're going to grow their market share, the share of the grocery market. Okay, so a very competitive market, the grocery market. I think we'll look at example in a minute as well. And Aldi are constantly trying to impact Woolies and Coles. Huge share of that market. So here's a bit more information. Again, just as an example, 4 main retailers market share: Woolworths, Coles, Aldi. So look, Woolworths is the market leader. So there's another term to maybe make a note of. The market leader is the business which has the largest market share in any particular market. Okay, that's definitely worth making a note of. So in terms of the grocery market in Australia, Woolies is the market leader with 37%, Coles has 28%, Aldi 10%, and then the rest follow behind. Okay, so all of them are constantly battling each other. They will be very acutely aware at any one point where their market share is, and they're constantly competing to increase that relative to everybody else in the industry. Here's another example, market share of mobile phone service providers in Australia, 2010 to 2021. And look, so you can see the market leader here is Telstra, not surprisingly. Again, not surprisingly, Optus comes in second, with Vodafone third, and then that top band, the red ones, covers all of the others. So again, another different a way of displaying market share kind of graphically, if you like. And this is the kind of information which you'll see at the end of this video you might be presented with and need to, analyse. Okay, so that's market share. Net profit, okay? Again, definition, pretty simple definition, but it's surprising how many people struggle to define net profit. It's so simple. It's revenue less expenses. But again, there's two different ones. Don't write them both. Choose one, either or of those. Or the second one could be an expansion of the first one if you needed to give a bit more detail. You basically subtract your total expenses from the total revenue earned over a period of time. Okay, is what it is. I think the fact that it's such a simple concept is why people sometimes struggle to define it. So just make sure you can. I just put AK the bottom line. It's kind of a colloquialism for profit, the bottom line. Okay, sometimes that reference, you might see that in the media. I don't know if you'd see it in a case, but people talk about the bottom line. And the reason it's called the bottom line is because on a profit and loss statement that business produces, the very bottom line shows the profit or the loss that the business made. So the term bottom line has just become synonymous with profit, basically. Again, just showing this kind of in use, if you like. So this business, again, reported increase in net profit, up almost 4 million to 71. So that's a good news story. But one thing I actually want to point out here, which is a really key thing to note, and that where people often go wrong, and when they're writing answers, they'll write something that is kind of factually incorrect. Notice it says profit is up here, but the second ring there, this is despite them selling less meat. Okay. Now, it tells you why. The third ring I've just put there, because the company reduced its reliance on external short-fed supply. I don't really know what external short-fed supply is. But the point I'm making here is that profit has increased while sales has decreased. That is a really key thing to note, okay? Just because sales go up does not mean, or sales go down does not mean profit goes down, and vice versa. Because when we're talking about profit, many other things come into play. So it looks like here, so while sales have gone down, they've somehow managed to reduce costs. So they've reduced the costs by more than what the sales is reduced by, which, if you think about how profit is calculated, mean that profit still goes up. Okay, so just be very careful with that one. Do not just assume because sales go up, profit goes up. Okay. Now, all businesses have the objective to make a profit. Okay, like if a business does not make a profit, it's impossible to survive in the long run. Whatever type of business, even a social enterprise, okay, needs to make a profit to remain viable. So this is a fundamental broad-based KPI to evaluate the business's success in achieving that key fundamental objective and its financial performance, okay? High or increasing profit figures are good for a business because those extra financial resources can be used to invest them back into the business, into development, growth, meeting other shareholder expectations. They may just be paid straight out as profit to the shareholders. If you're picking up on it, you've got low or decreasing profit figures, that can indicate that the business might not be sustainable in the long term, and therefore we need to make changes to address this. Now remember, because this whole thing is about change, everything links back to change, and that's the whole idea of looking at these KPIs. the whole point of the KPIs is to identify if we need to make changes within the business. Okay, so if we have dropping profit, what changes do we need to make to turn that situation around? Okay, do we need to come up with strategies to increase revenue, strategies to reduce cost? Probably both. Okay, so it's important to, again, remember all of this in the context of change, because that's what's behind all of this. Rate of productivity growth. So this now links back to operations management. We talk about productivity. So again, there's your definition: the change in the total output produced from a given level of inputs over time, expressed as a percentage. Okay. Excuse me. So this KPI basically measures the business ability to transform inputs into outputs. Okay. The ability of a business to increase output or production from any given amount of inputs basically measures the rate of productivity growth. Okay, so a key measure of how effective our operations is being. Just as a very simple example to put that into numbers, again, you wouldn't need to work these numbers out, but look, if a business could produce $1 million worth of product using $500,000 worth of resources in 1 year, but in the following year managed to still produce $1 million worth of product, but only used $400,000 worth of resources, productivity has increased from 2022 to 2023, a growth rate of 25% in that scenario. So I think pretty simple to understand. Obviously, it's a good thing for businesses to be seeing increasing productivity. Look, this might not seem obvious at first. This is just a press thing. This is actually an older one. It's one I've used for a number of years to kind of demonstrate this. Qantas plans further reduction in turnaround times as part of increased fleet utilization. And that utilization really is talking as another way of saying productivity in that industry. So what this is talking about is, okay, when you're running an airline, okay, planes are only earning you revenue when they're in the air, okay, carrying passengers from point to point. When they're sitting on the tarmac at the airport, they're not earning you money. So what airlines are constantly trying to do is to reduce the amount of time between when a plane lands and then when it next takes off again with its next group of passengers. That's the turnaround time. So if a plane lands at Melbourne Airport at 12 o'clock and then it next takes off to go on its next journey at 1 o'clock, the turnaround has been 1 hour. And they're constantly trying to reduce this time because it's more productive for the planes to be in the air. One of the ways the low-cost airlines manage to be low cost is because they have very high fleet utilization. Their turnaround times are super low, often as low as sort of half an hour or so, even maybe a little bit less by now. Okay, so that's just an example in real life of a business focusing on productivity. Number of sales, pretty straightforward, easy one, okay? Number of sales, there's your definition: total quantity of goods and services sold by a business over a specific period of time. Pretty straightforward, but again, it's so simple. Make sure you are actually able to put that into words. Now, tracking that KPI allows a business to determine whether it's meeting its sales forecasts and targets. And therefore, again, thinking about it in the context of change, do we need to change our strategies to increase sales? Okay. Tracking trends in sales. Now, this might be a daily process, a weekly process, monthly, seasonal, even geographical. So we might, if we're selling to other countries, we're going to be tracking our sales in each of the different markets that we're selling into. If we sell across Australia, we might track our sales state by state. So we might be increasing sales in one state, but they might be decreasing in another state. So again, that gives a starting point of we need to do an investigation in why it is that we're selling more in Queensland, but we're selling less in Victoria. It might be very obvious if it's a seasonal product. Like if it's swimwear, your sales in Queensland may stay more consistent because of the way the seasons work, but they might drop in winter. So it might be explainable. But if it's not immediately obvious, it leads to managers investigating what's leading to these changes, and it then allows us to investigate ways to deal with changing a business to reverse a declining KPI. Again, a reminder, increasing sales does not necessarily mean increasing profit. So if you put anything that kind of alludes to that, you're going to lose a mark, because that is not always the case. It certainly helps in you achieving, like increasing sales helps towards achieving higher profit, but just one does not directly lead to the other. And another point to note, increasing sales does not automatically even lead to an increase in market share. Okay. If you increase your sales, but your competitors also increase their sales, but by more, your market share might actually reduce. Okay. Because remember, market share is a comparative measure. Okay. So it's quite easy to increase your sales, but actually reduce market share at the same time. So for example, during COVID, sales in a whole bunch of different things absolutely went through the roof. Musical instruments, gardening equipment, fitness equipment, board games, arts and crafts, so on and so forth. I mean, I think if you look at those, it's fairly obvious to see why that might have happened. Now, most businesses in producing that stuff probably increased sales over that period of time. I think the thing that stopped a lot of busy increased sales, because it kind of came sudden, they didn't have the capacity to actually meet the demand. They could have sold more if they could have produced more. That was the thing that kind of got in the way. But if businesses could manage to actually meet capacity, then sales definitely would have increased. So most businesses operating in those spaces would have increased sales, but not all would have increased market share, because everybody in that industry was increasing sales. So you have to look at that relative. So again, just really think about, again, how these KPIs relate to one another. Increasing one does not necessarily, as obvious it might seem, it might lead to an increase in the other. Okay, rate of staff absenteeism. So again, this now goes back to, we've looked at this, we've heard about this recently in the second outcome of Unit 3 when we looked at HR management. Again, there's a definition. We probably would have defined that then, but here it is for you again now. Basically, this is all about sickies, essentially. Okay, people not being at work when they should be. So again, a few different definitions for you. Choose one which resonates, but it's really important that you can define it accurately. Yeah, like I say, this is all about, in the Australian vernacular, chucking a sickie, which is a very Australian term. Now, if a business has a high rate of staff absenteeism, or more importantly, increasing, remember this whole idea about KPIs being comparative. So if it's increasing from where it was, that can indicate that staff are unhappy. Okay, that's not new information. We looked at that back in Unit 3. So businesses need to monitor their rates of staff absenteeism. They need to be measuring it all the time, so they know if it's increasing or decreasing, so that if it is increasing, they can identify the cause of that increase and then take some steps to get it back where it should be. Okay. So with this KPI in particular, it's really important to compare it to things. And we talked about how different ways in which you compare them. And this really, you do have to do both. Okay, so you definitely compare it over a period of time within your own business. So you're identifying if it's increasing or decreasing. But also you do need to take into account, particularly this one, what is normal in your industry. Okay, so you definitely look at industry benchmarks. So for example, the business at the bottom, McDonald's and Boost, both in fast food retail, whatever industry you want to kind of call that. And then Clayton Utz is one of Australia's largest law firms. McDonald's and Boost, or the industry in which they operate, generally are going to have a higher staff turnover than a law firm like Clayton Utz. Okay, I mean, hopefully that would be obvious to you, even without me explaining it to you. But look, you work in retail. Most of your staff are, they're part-timers, they're students. This is not their career, it's their holiday job. They're there just to earn the money. It's not a career. This is not a long-term thing for them. And as soon as they find another job, well, actually, that's more staff turnover. Absent, they're much more likely to chuck a sickie than a professional lawyer who is working in a job that's their career. You know what I mean? So you're going to have a much higher, and also, McDonald's and Boost, much younger staff. And actually, there's a bit of an indicator of that in a minute. Younger staff, we'll see in a second, are more likely to chuck sickies than older people. And again, Clayton Utz is going to have a higher age profile than McDonald's and Boost would have. So hopefully it's obvious why, but the point is you need to be aware of what the industry norm is for your what kind of range should our absenteeism be sitting in, but then also bringing into account, is it increasing or decreasing? Okay, so a few things to look at here. Look here, yeah, there's an article, Retail World, so an industry magazine for the retail industry, and this is talking about the cost of sick days. Workplace absenteeism has cost Australian businesses $14 billion in lost productivity so far this year. So this is back end of 2022. So this is talking about 2022 figures. According to research, 1 in 10 employees are absent from work on any given day. That seems really high to me. And again, that's in retail. Okay, remember this is focused on retail. Well, I think actually, I'm not sure if this is, when it says Australian businesses, I'm not sure if this is actually focusing down business as a whole. So I'm not sure. I'd have to look in more. So if this is focusing just on retail, fair enough. But if that 1 in 10 is looking across all business types, then again, there's going to be more in retail, fast food, and less in professional businesses. So I'm not sure where that's sitting. But what's interesting here is, it's found that Gen Zs, so the younger generation, have taken the most sick leave, averaging 14.3 sickies this year, compared with 8.9 by baby boomers, so the older generation. So yeah, it does. I mean, it seems apparent to me that is happening. But yeah, the younger you go down in the workforce, it seems the more quickly that staff are going to, more quick to jump at taking a sickie. I don't know. Any interesting? Right, closely linked to absenteeism is our staff turnover. Okay, so again, we know there's a close link to those from earlier in the course. So this is now the rate at which staff leave a business and need to be replaced, expressed as a percentage. It's a very accurate definition there. Okay, not just leaving a business. Okay, because leaving a business could mean people that are, being made redundant. That's not included in staff turnover. Staff turnover are people that are leaving and you have to replace them, okay? So that's an important part for the definition. Often people kind of half define it, the number of people which are leaving a business, which have to be replaced is essential, otherwise you don't score. Okay, now this one often follows. If absenteeism is increasing, turnover will often follow, because people start by taking sickies and then ultimately they leave the business. So this one, very closely linked to absenteeism. Similar information to staff absenteeism. High absenteeism leads to high staff turnover. And again, for that reason, you kind of need to look at trends within your business. Is it increasing, decreasing? But also industry benchmarks is really clear for this one again, because again, turnover in a law firm is naturally going to be much lower than turnover in a McDonald's. So if you're you're running an office of Clayton Utz and your mate is running a McDonald's restaurant, the manager of Clayton Utz could go, I'm running, my staff turnover is 5%, and the Macca's goes, my turnover is like 40%. Doesn't mean anything, okay? They're different types of businesses. Naturally, you would expect it to be more. You need to be comparing like for like, compare apples with apples, oranges with oranges, and then look within your own business. That 5% and that 40%, is that on an upwards trend or a downwards trend? That's the important information, not just comparing a law firm with a fast food restaurant. Now, again, if staff turnover is high, it can indicate there's dissatisfaction in the workplace, just the same as absenteeism. Staff turnover is also a direct financial cost to a business, because if you need to replace people, there's advertising and recruitment costs involved. You then need to induct and train new employees, which attracts a cost, and loss of knowledge and experience from the business is also a cost of that. So there's lots and lots of different areas of cost to turnover. So if you have high turnover and you can bring that back down, that can have a really, really quite quick impact on level of profitability. So a few strategies just going to throw in to deal with rising absenteeism and or staff turnover. Now, I'm not going to go into detail on how to deal with declining results in all of these KPI areas, because that's more dealt with in outcome 2. But just to throw in a few here, it just sort of seems more valid for these particular 2. Look, and again, this is actually, I guess really the reason I'm throwing this is because this is kind of repeating stuff from earlier in the course as well. Look, if our absenteeism or our turnover is going up, make sure we're training management well and they're using the appropriate management styles. Okay, provide support for employees, reward and recognise good performance, provide training and development opportunities for the employees, make employees feel involved and empowered. All of that stuff there, we've seen before when we were looking at HR management. So like I said, nothing new, but it's now kind of putting it or linking it into this context of looking at KPIs. Benefits to a business of having low absenteeism and low turnover. It avoids all of those costs associated with high turnover, therefore contributes to an increase in profit. But another thing to throw in here, which is a new concept to you, to become an employer of choice. Okay, an employer of choice. Now, big business is always competing to become an employer of choice in their industry. Okay, so an employer of choice is a business that attracts and retains basically the best employees in that industry. Okay, they've established inclusive workplace environments, positive corporate culture. It basically, what it means is, if you're an employer of choice, you're one of the best businesses to work for in your industry from an employee perspective. And there are awards put out every year, for businesses. And then you can say, look, we were an employer of choice winner in whatever year it was. So when I was recruiting, as an example, when I was recruiting back in 2005, 2007, I did some recruitment in the financial services sector in Melbourne. So I was recruiting across the big banks, predominantly the big 4 banks. Now, at that time, the NAB, the National Australia Bank, was kind of deemed to be the employer of choice in the banking sector. Okay. And, I knew lots of people working across all the banks. And if you talked to people employed by the NAB, they just loved working there. The culture was awesome. They rewarded well. There was just lots of aspects of the environment that they enjoyed, and they really didn't want to leave. And therefore, when I was trying to recruit for NAB, it was pretty easy because I'd have so many applicants working for the other 3 big banks and other people beyond that wanted to get into NAB because it's a great place to work. It was pretty easy to fill jobs at NAB. Okay. The other banks, not so much so. Okay. It was a little bit more challenging because they were not deemed to be the best bank to work for. So that's kind of how it works. Look at another example, Starbucks. Now, I know Starbucks, they kind of failed in Australia, but they're obviously huge in other parts of the world. But certainly in America, Starbucks in their industry, in coffee shops, even fast food, it depends on how far you want to extend the definition of what industry they're in. But in that kind of industry, they are absolutely seen as an employer of choice. Okay. Train and motivate employees, an important factor to run restaurants smoothly. Starbucks has the lowest employee turnover among quick service restaurants. Okay, so that's how they're defining them. And it then tells you a bit about why. And I've read about this as well. This is kind of true. Has really strong employee engagement strategies. It makes sure its staff are motivated, constantly looking at new perks to offer employees, and focuses on training. Okay, they have an online portal which offers a lot of their training, blah, blah, blah. So they have a real bunch of strategies in place that look after their staff, so that first off, they can attract the best staff, and then those staff stay with them, clearly because they have the lowest staff turnover in that sector. Okay, so just an example of how this can be a benefit to the business. On the flip side of that, this was an article from the back end of 2022 where Amazon had uncovered, look at this one, less than a third of new hires stay with a company for more than, 3 months, 90 days. That's appalling. That's a huge staff turnover. So there's obviously some issues going on in that business, which this article I think went on to talk about. And look at the impact of this. Amazon's poor attrition. Attrition means losing people, costing the company around $8 billion a year, almost a quarter of its annual profit. So if it could deal with that, that's a huge amount of money that rather than being cost would contribute towards their profit. So we've just seen there, Amazon doing it really well. Starbucks doing it really, really well. Amazon, not so much so. So what this means is Amazon would know this and they would be desperately trying to put some strategies in place, so making change in the business to address this issue. Okay, coming back to change. Level of wastage, our seventh KPI. So this obviously relates direct to operations management from the end of Unit 3. A measure of how much or how the amount of product or material discarded by the business during the production process. You would have had that earlier on. So this year, an operations-focused KPI. So in outcome 3.3, looked at waste minimization strategies. So basically, this KPI measures how well those strategies are actually working. If we're doing lean management or the 3 Rs, this will actually give us a measure of, we know, are these strategies working? Why do we want to reduce this KPI? Why do we want to reduce wastage? Number one, cost, and number two, corporate social responsibility. Okay, nothing new there, just reframing it in this context. Number of customer complaints, pretty straightforward one, a measure that shows the number of customers who are dissatisfied with the business. This is the key, and have officially expressed this dissatisfaction to the business. That's key, that second part. Again, I often see half definitions, number of people that are not happy with the business. They have to have officially expressed that dissatisfaction to the business. Different means of doing that. It might be through a website, it might be through filling out a form, but you have to tell the business about it, and businesses will measure this information. So clearly, a high level of customer complaints indicates dissatisfaction within your customer base. Yeah, no brainer. But if you have low levels, that indicates that, largely speaking, your customers are satisfied and they're happy. Okay. High or rising levels might uncover a need to focus on maybe product or service quality. It might mean that we need to focus on some staff training, whatever it might be. But the whole point is, if we're measuring customer complaints and we see an increase, that sets the alarm bells off. We go, right, okay, something's going on here. We need to investigate. You find out what it is that's causing it, then it allows you to make changes to deal with that negative situation. Now, in a world with online review websites, social media platforms, more important than ever, the businesses deal with customer complaints quickly and effectively. Otherwise, reputation damage can happen really quickly, really extensively. So we've got, TripAdvisor, product review. There's so many different websites now, and you've got all these keyboard warriors out there that are more than happy to go and lead a bad review. So now actually a lot of big businesses employ people just to manage their social media. So they'll be constantly reviewing these and putting in responses to any complaints or thanking people for positive reviews, which happens less often. But yeah, it's just really important to be aware and on top of, particularly if you're featuring a lot of one of these websites, you need to be aware of that and not just ignoring the fact that every day hundreds of people are bagging you online, because that just gives you a really bad reputation really quickly. So it's just something you need to be aware of, and again, then deal with. This one is new in the new study design. Number of website hits. I guess there's a reason for it being new, because it's a newer thing than some of the others. So this KPI literally measures the amount of customer visits that a business online platform receives over a period of time. Okay, pretty straightforward. But again, it's so straightforward. Make sure you can actually put it into actual words. Now, business can actually take this further now. There's businesses out there that are set up to look after this for other businesses. This can get really complex, the analysis that goes on. So businesses now might be interested in a whole bunch of different metrics, such as number of independent website hits. So how many different people are visiting the website, number of new visitors versus the number of returners to the website. The average time spent on a website can be useful information. Even the route people took to reach the website. So what link did they click on? How did they find the website? Okay, so, and there's many, many more. But point I'm making here is this can be much more complex than literally how many times was our website hit last month. There's lots and lots of different ways to break down this information to give you different types of information that might be useful to you. Okay, so this gives you information on such as levels of customer engagement with your business. How engaged are customers with us as a business? The level of interest in your products and services, the strength of your online presence. Like if you have a weak online presence in 2020, in the 2020s, that's not a good thing. Most businesses now need some kind of online presence, and if not, a pretty strong one to compete with other businesses that might be stronger than you in that space. And the quality of your online platform. We looked at that metric before, how long people spend on a website. Like if you're finding people are hitting a website and very quickly leaving it, it might mean because your online platform's a bit crap, not very user-friendly. So again, it might initiate a discussion in how we change that. So lots of different types of information that you can get from a seemingly fairly simple metric. And finally, the last of the KPIs, number of workplace accidents. Okay, so this is measuring the number of injuries and unsafe incidents that occur at work over a specific period of time, or number of unplanned events interrupting some part of the operation. That may or may not include injury, okay? So although accidents implies injury, doesn't have to include injury. So you've got even that first definition is okay, because number of injuries and unsafe incidents, okay? So not just injuries to people, okay? And again, often that is stated in exam questions. So just be careful how you word this so you don't imply we're just talking about physical injuries to human beings, because it is broader than that. Okay. This measure obviously gives information about how important the business and the employees within it view safety. Are we taking safety seriously? Have we got stuff in place to minimize the risk of injury or incident? Okay, so a low level of this or a reducing level of this might demonstrate that employers are taking employee safety seriously. And that can also then boost other KPIs. Okay, absenteeism can reduce. Turnover is going to reduce because people feel they're being looked after. High or increasing levels might uncover issues such as a lack of training provided to employees around this stuff. It might uncover some faulty or some old equipment that needs to be either fixed or replaced. It might uncover some unsafe working practices that are happening within the business, have kind of gone on for a while, and sometimes people accept these as the norm. This is just how we do it, but it's actually unsafe. We need to change that. It might uncover some dangerous or unsafe tasks that we might be able to do in a different way. For example, introducing some technology that could do it instead. Okay, so again, lots of different kind of insights into the business by measuring a number of workplace accidents. It can take you in lots of different directions. Benefits associated with reducing this KPI, reduction in WorkSafe premiums. You don't need to know a huge amount of that, but basically all businesses need to pay a premium to WorkSafe Victoria. All businesses in Victoria need to pay that premium, which then if there is an accident, then basically they pay the compensation out. And the amount of premium that you pay is directly linked to the associated level of risk within your business. If you can demonstrate lower risk, you'll pay a lower premium, basically. And reductions, disruptions, operations, therefore lost production, productivity, improvements, morale, I just touched on that. And if we've got improvements in morale, that can also lead to increases in productivity, increasing quality of work output, again, lower absenteeism, lower turnover, and general improvements in business reputation. Again, not an exhaustive list, but some examples of some of the benefits that the business will see by reducing or minimizing the number of workplace accidents. Okay, so look, that's the KPIs we've just looked at. Make sure you can define each of them really accurately. And then, have some information to hand about why businesses are measuring them, what sort of information they're providing to the business about the performance of the business or some aspect of the business. Okay, that's kind of the key with these. And you'll practice this a bit, you'll get the idea. Now, framing this another way, what aspects of performance can these KPIs be useful in measuring? And now I'm thinking about the way that questions are often framed, okay? So this is sort of almost flipping this around. So if the question is asking about which KPIs the business could use to give them some information about the quality of the product they're producing, then those 3 KPIs would be appropriate KPIs to be measuring to give you some information about that. Okay, number of sales, market share, customer complaints. Okay. If the question was asking you about to come up with some KPIs that could measure how effective the operations part of the business is, then those 3 KPIs would be relevant. If it's asking how the business could measure its staff morale, we've got these 2. Financial performance, number of sales, net profit. If it's asking you to measure, or how could the business measure how effective a marketing campaign has been? We have those 3, for example, might be appropriate. Okay. So the point is, if you're given a scenario, okay, from case material, and you need to choose a KPI that should be used, make sure you choose an appropriate one. So, for example, if the question asks for a KPI that could help in measuring staff morale, number of sales or potential market share is not going to be right. Okay, you need to be talking about staff turnover or absenteeism. Now, can I add something else in here? Who is responsible for what? Okay, this is an important thing to get a head around as well. So I'll ask you a question, right? If we wanted to assess the performance of a range of managers in a business, which of the following managers could we use net profit as one of the measures by which we judge their performance? Okay, so if we're looking at net profit, can we assess the performance of the HR manager by looking at net profit, the operations manager, finance, sales and marketing, CEO? One of them, all of them, a range of them? What's your answer? So pause the video here, think about that. What would your answer to that actually be? Okay, right now. Okay, net profit. Is it fair to judge the human resources manager based on the net profit that the business is making? And the same for all of those others, okay? That's what I'm asking you. Think about your answer. Now, before I give you the answer, let me ask you another question. If teachers received performance-related pay, we don't, but if we did, and for me, as a Year 12 business management teacher, the bonus that I received was based on the performance of students. Okay, so performance-related pay, we get paid based on the performance of the students. Now, would it be fair to base my bonus, and therefore assessing my performance and my job, on the overall average ATAR of the Year 12 cohort? Or B, would it be fair to base my bonus and therefore assess my performance in my job on the average study score of the Year 12 students or the Year 12 BMA students that I taught in that year? Okay, both of those fair, one of those fair? Now, I would say definitely not A, because the overall average ATAR of the Year 12 cohort, I really have very extremely limited impact on that, because all students do 5 subjects, whatever it is. A lot of them don't even do business, and even if they do, it's only 1 of 5. So what is the impact that I personally can have on the average ATAR of students? Minimal. So it's not really fair to judge my performance as a teacher based on that, because I can't control that. Now, B, would that be fair? Look, maybe. I mean, look, there's problems there as well. I mean, at the end of the day, every cohort is not the same. But I guess you could argue it would be fairer to base my bonus based on the study score of the students that I actually teach. At least I have some impact, some, input into that. But certainly not A. For A, you could argue that potentially the principal of the school, maybe. Because they are responsible for everything that happens within this school. And the average ATAR of students is one of the things that falls under that remit. Okay, so someone that, is looking after school overall, that's one of the things that they're going to be judged by. So you could argue the principal, but certainly not a teacher of an individual subject. So now if we come back to this question, what was your answer? Okay. Who has responsibility for net profit? Okay. Only the CEO. The human resource manager might be the best human resource manager on the planet, doing a great job. Staff morale is brilliant. Staff turnover is low. Absenteeism is low. All the trade staff are trained, but maybe the product is not being produced very efficiently, which means there's a cost there, which is impacting profit. That's nothing to do with the HR manager. That's to do with the operations manager. Okay. So what I'm saying is the way to look at this, when you're using KPIs to measure people, departments, you can only use KPIs which relate to things that they have control over or responsibility for. Profit encompasses everything that happens within a business. Everything contributes to profit. The only person who is responsible for everything is the CEO. Okay. Hopefully that makes sense to you. So the golden rule is only assess someone's performance based on the things that they have control over. That can be really important in some questions. Now, finally, some questions around this content, okay? I'm just going to skim through this. You will get some practice in this, but just to demonstrate how this is now very different, okay? There are some, you're still writing your questions in words, but now you're looking at different types of information than you've looked at before. So in 2019 exam, you were given this information. And basically, I'm not going to go into detail, but you had to interpret the KPIs. So in other words, you had to look at this data you've got in front of you, and you had to make some comments about what that is telling you about the performance of the business, okay? And there was a few questions framed around that, okay? So you can see this is new. In 2018, again, we got a table of some key KPIs, okay? Some 4 KPIs there and how they change from one year to the next. One of the questions here was, with reference to that data, analyse the extent to which the purchase of the new machinery has assisted them to improve the performance. So if you read the case at the top there, basically it's a window tinting business. They were disappointed with the business after trading for 1 year. So at the end of that year, they decided to purchase some new machinery and automate the tinting process. And then at the end of the second year, they measured the same KPIs. So basically what you had to do here, 6 marks, quite a bit, basically comment on, was that a good business decision? Okay. Now, what it's asking you to do, is basically to say, was buying that new machinery the right decision to make or not? What you need to do is justify what you're saying using the information that you see. Now, the reality is, if you look at those KPIs, some of them are moving in the right direction and some of them are not. That's what you need to comment on in your analysis. So profit. So in year 2, after making these improvements to the business and buying this machinery and automating the process, profit actually went down. That's not a good thing, hence red. Rate of productivity growth went from 2 to 8%. So it's moved up. Green, because that's a move in the right direction. We want to see that. So that's a good move. Customer complaints has gone down. That's green because we want customer complaints to go down. And absenteeism has actually increased. So that's a negative move. So what's interesting is we've made the decision to buy some machinery, and a year on, 2 of our KPIs have actually gotten worse, whilst 2 have gotten better. And I guess what's even more interesting is the number 1 KPI, if you want net profit, has actually gone down. So does that mean this was a bad business decision? This is what you need to put into your answer here, okay? So you need to talk about those KPIs and what they're telling us. And what you need to do is try to link it to this case and explain why those KPIs may have happened. Now, that's actually not too difficult a thing to do, as I'll now demonstrate. Now, productivity, okay? We've said new machinery has helped in improving productivity. It's increased from 2 to 8%. And that makes sense because we've automated the tinting process. It means that less time is taken and less human effort is going to be needed for each job. Therefore, we see an increase in productivity or efficiency. So that one actually makes sense. So that could be explained. So that forms part of your answer. Customer complaints has dropped from substantially 112 to 28. And again, when you are answering these questions, do put the KPIs, the numbers you're seeing, into your answers, reference them directly. Again, that does make sense. If you think back to automation, one of the advantages when we're discussing automation is the fact that it's more accurate. It produces more consistent results. So this could be explained by the automation leading to a higher quality, more consistent result, therefore leading to fewer customer complaints. So we can explain that one away. Now, absenteeism, that's increased. Okay, how might we explain that given what we've got here? This is where you need to think, okay? So these are questions where you need to kind of, this isn't just regurgitating content. This is where you really need to have a really good understanding of the content and then make some connections. So this could be explained by a drop in staff morale because their roles have changed or they fear for their job security, okay? The morale might have changed because now the automation is really doing the job and they're left with some pretty basic jobs or something. Morale might be dropped. They might be fearing their job security because they're getting worried that the machinery is going to replace them. That's going to lead to a drop in morale. And again, if morale drops, that leads to an increase in absenteeism. So there's a logical, reasonable explanation for that one. What about profit? Profit, obviously a really important KPI. Profit is more than halved, okay? We made $47,000 in profit in year one. We then put this machinery in and we only made $23,000, okay? So you think on the surface, that was a bad move. But you bought the machinery, okay? So that impact on profit could actually be accounted for by the cost of actually buying the machinery itself and then any training costs associated with getting the employees how to use it. So that profit figure in year two might actually be completely explained by the cost of the machinery. I mean, for example, if the machinery cost you $100,000, take that out of the equation, year two profit would have been $123,000. So again, hopefully you can see, all you need to do is look at the KPIs. What are they telling us? Is this good? This is bad? What might explain that move in KPI? So that's I think, a good example to look at. And that's something you'll need to be able to do with questions. Here's another type of question, which this was from 2017. Okay, so basically it showed staff turnover over a period of 5 years there, how that changed. Okay, and it says, describe the impact that change might have had on one other KPI. So staff turnover is one of our 10. That means you have 9 others to choose from, okay? So if you think about that, over the period shown, it's increased. It's basically doubled. It's gone from 9% to 18%. 2020, 12, 9%, 2018, 18, 2017, 18. Now, I know it's kind of gone a bit like that, but really you're looking at the overall trend is clearly upwards. So that is not a good thing, okay? Essentially, over that 5-year period, our staff turnover has doubled. So the question is, how might that increase directly impact one other KPI? Lots of answers here. Increase in turnover means more people are leaving the business. Business are having to recruit more often and induct and train new employees. There are direct costs associated with both of those activities. We've even covered that slightly in this video. That has a direct negative impact on profitability, which is one of our other KPIs. Another example, and again, this is just not the only other example, but another way. Turnover increases, more people are leaving the business. That means the workforce at any particular time includes a high proportion of new employees who won't have the training, skills, or experience to perform at the same level as those they've replaced, hence possibly reducing the rate of productivity growth. So it's all about understanding these KPIs, how they kind of work, how they can interplay with one another to carry out this type of analysis that you will be asked to do, okay? So hopefully that makes some sense, but you will get some good practice at doing that. All right, breaking down this video, okay? just quick skim through there. That's what we've now done. Okay. Hopefully now, if you look at each of those, if you look back at your notes, you go, okay, yep, that makes sense. So that's just re-summarizing what we've done. That is it for the video. I'll get out of here pretty quick because that was a long one. See you in the next one. Cheers for now.